Mr. Gray's Gettysburg, a murder mystery by Wayne Erreca. Act 1, Scene 1. The scene opens with Thornton L. Sims, a black man in his late 40s, sitting at a small wooden table with shackled hands. He is dressed in black pants and a dark blue prison jacket that is labeled with its identification number. Leaning against the wall is defense attorney Mr. Benedict Millstone, wearing a fine tailored gray suit. The lighting is directed on Sims, with Millstone pacing in and out of the light and into the shadows. "Did you murder Mr. John Gray, Thornton?" "No, sir. Mr. Gray, I were like family. I never heard him. They got the wrong man. It's awfully right of you taking me on this way, Mr. Gray. Would be mighty grateful to you. I don't have my money, no, sir. I'd be in a sorry lot if it weren't for you. I'm a lucky man. Do you understand the severity of the accusations against you? I ain't worried, because I ain't the one who done it. Like I said, they got the wrong man. It'll come out in the wash soon enough. You'll see. This is a capital crime, and they will hang you if you're found guilty. They don't appreciate a black man killing a prominent white man. Makes them real nervous. Lord, be my judge. No, sir, I didn't do nothing to hurt him. I know what they can do to me, but the grace of the Lord would be my defense. I am your defense. As your legal counsel, I'm instructed to advise you to take this very seriously. Your life depends on what you share with me. Withhold nothing, and refrain from shortening any truth. Do I have your attention?" "Yes, sir. Poor Mrs. Tiffany. She don't deserve this, bless her soul. She shouldn't have seen him like that. No, sir." "Did he love her?" "That's a mighty deep ocean, sir. There's a lot of things swimming around down there between them that muddies the water. Mr. Gray holds tight to what he owns, but turns his head from what slips away." "Was he unkind to her?" "Yes, sir, but he never struck an angry blow against her. He could be mighty fire-bitten when raised to a boil. He was heard to scorch a few words now and then, but it was just his nature. He got that from his daddy. Words spun out of his mouth like an angry tornado whenever he felt cornered." "You've been in service of him for a generous span of time. Can you share the nature of your relationship over these past few months?" "Yes, sir." "Before you do, is it correct to say he was your daddy?" "How did you know that?" I guess it don't matter much how you heard. Truth is, Mr. Gray was my daddy, of sorts. Not like other children. I sort of belonged to him. My mama's name was Moolah. She was a slave. Her mama was a nanny for a Gray household, and her name was Tabby. The Grays were wealthy New Orleans plantation folks, long before the Civil War broke out. Sorry has it, my mama caught the eye of young John Gray. After a tumble in the cotton bin, my mama was showing signs that eventually led her to being sold across the country to a neighboring plantation. as she was giving birth, things went bad for her. Child survived, but my poor mama never laid eyes on her son. Then the baby was wrapped up and given back to the Grays. I guess they were angered about her dying and had no need for the child. You were that child? Yes, sir. My grandma Tabby raised me. Everyone knew who I was and who I came from, but only in whispers, far from Mr. John Gray's ears, as many black folks do after the war ended. We stayed on doing her chores. Where else can we go? It's all you know. Yes, sir. 49 years I've spent serving Mr. Gray. Did he ever acknowledge you as his heir? He kept me close, which I'm indicted, but like I said, he holds tight to what he owns. Describe Mrs. Gray's demeanor, and was she distraught in any way? She was as fresh as spring air. When Mrs. Tiffany entered a room, her scent filled every corner, like peach blossoms and lilac. Yes, sir, she was a wondrous sight. Mr. Gray outdone himself when fetching her into his life. Of course, there were times I knew he don't deserve her. No, sir. The light slowly dimmed to black on the room as Thornton continues to speak as the lights slowly rise on the dining room of Mr. Gray's house. The light slowly dimmed to black on the interrogation room as Thornton continues to speak as the lights slowly rise on the dining room of Mr. Gray's house. There is a circular wooden table with 4 chairs positioned around it in the center of the room, with a quaint fireplace and mantel, and several smaller rectangular wooden tables against the walls carrying candles, flower vases, a bottle of brandy with glasses, and picture frames. People like her deserve better, and she loved putting fresh flowers everywhere in the house in the morning. Mrs. Tiffany Gray enters the dining room, wearing a blue and white summer dress, with her hair grown atop her head, carrying a wicker basket full of fresh cut flowers. She's in her mid-20s and is a lovely sight to see. She sets the wicker basket on a table as she hums and sings "Shine On, Harvest Moon," while separating the long stem flowers.
Shine on, harvest moon, up in the sky. I ain't had no lovin' since January, February, June or July. Snow time, ain't no time to sit outdoors and spoon. Shine on, harvest moon, for me and my gal. Da, 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 da. Thornton, be a dear and bring me some pruning shears and a pitcher of water. These poor little old flowers are screaming for moisture, and I want them lasting through the day.
What is coming, Mrs. Tiffany? We don't want your pretty flowers drying up and blowing away. You sure know how to pick 'em, Mrs. Tiffany.
Thornton, do you realize the importance pruning is to keeping a healthy garden? You have to cut them to ensure positive growth. It's the pruning that preserves their beauty.
Yes, ma'am. You gotta know what to cut and when to cut it.
I swear, most men believe flowers grow on their own accord, especially John. But we know different, don't we?
We certainly do, but I don't want Mr. Gray hearing that.
Why do you call him that? Everybody knows he's your daddy.
I wouldn't know what else to call him.
How about John?
I couldn't do that, Mrs. Tiffany.
What's he gonna do, shoot you?
No, well, no, but he'd get mighty angry.
He's your daddy, isn't he?
Yes, but it's always been Mr. Gray, and I don't figure changing it now.
Suit you, it seems plain crazy to me.
Some things just don't need fixing, I guess.
Has he ever talked about your mama?
No, ma'am.
If he were my daddy, I'd want to know.
My Tabby told me all I need to know about her. Mr. Gray does things the way he sees fit. It ain't my business changing it, no none.
Well, why have you stayed with him all these years? You're a free man, aren't you?
Yes, ma'am.
But not while you're under his roof, you're not.
He's never kept me from leaving.
Why do you stay then?
When I was 8 or 9, I was helping my Tabby in the kitchen. It was early morning and we were the only two up. She had me peeling taters for breakfast. I'd like peeling taters because I crave funny faces on them. She didn't like that because it slowed off progress. I loved being with her. She told me how Mr. Gray helped her like no other person ever did. She was his nanny from the time he was born. But there came a time when he was around 8 years old when his daddy thought it best in selling her to a young sharecropping family hurting for labors. The deal was nearly done when out of the clouds comes little John Gray screaming and hollering how he didn't want his Tabby going elsewhere. Yes, he threw such a fit his daddy tanned his hide with an elm twig. Did he stop his screaming? No, ma'am. He held firm, forcing his whipping to go all the longer. Finally, his daddy couldn't bring him, so he apologized to the sharecropper, and Tabby stayed put. Poor Mr. John Gray couldn't sit at the dinner table for a whole week because his behind was so blistered. After the war ended, she stayed with him. I guess you can say I just tagged along.
Be a dear and fetch some more water, Thornton. What about marriage?
Marriage?
Surely you want to be a daddy someday.
There was a time I did, but the sun doesn't always shine on every tree. Some are forced to live in the shade.
Have you ever been in love?
I suppose.
Did you want to marry her?
I hoped to one day.
What stopped you?
She was white.
What was she like?
Her name was Abigail, but I called her Abby. She was a pretty thing. Golden brown hair with freckles on her nose and the sweetest smile you ever did see.
How did you meet?
Her daddy had come to ask Mr. Gray a favor. He needed a loan to replace his roofing. You see, he was a preacher man. He had just arrived from New England and was fixing to start up a new church on the east side of town.
What kind of minister?
Yeah. They're all the same, aren't they?
Well, not exactly, but did he have a wife?
She died at the sea when they were getting here. Tossed her overboard off the Florida coast.
When did you first see her?
Mr. Gray asked me to take some oats out to the preacher's horse and buggy. I didn't know she'd be sitting there, though. Her eyes lit up when I neared her. At first, I thought I'd spoke her. But then there was that smile. I didn't know what to think. Maybe I looked funny or something. Then I heard her sweet voice asking my name. When I told her, she repeated it, and I swear, never did I ever hear it said finer in my life.
What then?
I stood there feeding that horse, one oat at a time, so I could talk with her as long as I could.
So that was the beginning?
Yes, Mrs. Tiffany. But to this day, I don't know what faith they were. I showed up at their church every Sunday over the next year. I only knew two things were sure. They talked a lot about Jesus, and Abby had the prettiest smile in the whole congregation.
Did you meet outside the church?
I let her know the days I ran errands in town. The streets were busy with folks, and we'd be a distance from one another, making eyes and smiling. She'd usually sit on a bench in front of the hardware store, knitting on a sweater, taking peeks at me, where I was leaning up against a wood pole on the other side of the street.
Weren't you scared her daddy would find out?
He was different than other white folks. He didn't mind my talking to his daughter. Abby said it was their faith that made him colorblind. He told her I was no less a man than any other son of the South.
It's hard to believe he was that tolerant.
Before long, I was helping him put new shingles on his church roof, and I was invited to their lunch table sitting right next to Abby.
Did John know what you were doing?
He was gone most of the time on trips to Georgia and South Carolina. I made my own decisions then.
Did he know about her?
I figured what he don't know ain't gonna hurt much, so I kept it a secret.
Did any others become suspicious?
People noticed start talking and smiling, thinking something was dirty between us. It was spreading round, which got back to her father. He decided to share his feelings in his next Sunday sermon. He talked about the fear people have when up against something they don't understand, and how it makes them strike out in anger. He said our country fought a civil war to rid those fears, and that was the very same fear that crucified Jesus.
What was their reaction?
They were real quiet, walking out of that church. There was a fire that night. People were running all around carrying buckets of water. I was running there until I was out of my breath. What struck me odd was there were more people watching than helping. I ran into the burning house with black smoke choking me and picked up her limp body, setting her in the dirt a safe way from the caving porch and roofing. I looked down at her black ashen face, thinking, even in dying, she was the most beautiful woman I ever did see.
I'm so sorry.
Her father went back to New England after that day. I had no reason to want another wife. Sometimes people don't get to follow their hearts the way they want.
See who that is, Thornton, and if it's Mrs. Riggins, tell her I'm out for the day, and if it's not, offer whoever it is a tall glass of lemonade.
Thornton exits, leaving her humming Shine On Harvest Moon as she pours water into the flower vases. Within a few moments, standing in the dining room door, is Colonel Richard Brubaker, and he is a handsomely dressed gentleman in his mid-30s, wearing a stylish dark suit. Unseen, he quietly admires her beauty. You have a lovely voice.
Or more like poison to one's ears. But thank you kindly, sir. How do you do, Colonel Brubaker? Welcome to our home. I'm Mrs. Tiffany Gray, the banker's wife.
I'm honored to meet you.
You're out of uniform, Colonel.
So I am. I'm retired and only wear my uniform at gala fairs and city parades.
I love seeing a man in uniform. What a pity. Mr. Gray is usually prompt when guests first arrive. Are you here for a loan?
No, but for another business matters.
Can I get you a tall glass of lemonade?
Mr. John Gray enters the room, wearing a smoking jacket and dark slacks. He is average in height, with longish white hair, and in his late 60s. He exudes confidence and an unpredictable nature, causing others to be uncomfortably unbalanced. Words of wisdom, sir. Bid her good day and ignore her mischievousness.
You flatter me, John.
She enjoys beguiling, dashing upstarts, and you want a drink, sir? I have some good old Kentucky whiskey in my office.
But it's still morning, John.
A man can drink whatever he wants at any hour of the day. Do you find her attractive, sir? Excuse me? Is she or isn't she the most beautiful woman in all of Louisiana? I don't understand the nature of your question, sir. I can see you're a respectful man of another's property. Don't give it another thought.
He likes to think I'm a high-brower than one of his stable horses.
You've had your fun, Tiffany. Bid all guests good day and off with you. We have more important business than sprucing flowers, buds.
How are you at pruning rosebuds, Colonel? If you're interested, I'll show you someday.
I apologize for my wife's flirtatious behavior. No offense, sir. I blame it on her incorrigible youth, which is the price a man my age must endure. Do you flock many birds to your nest? Hardly, sir. My work devours most of my waking hours, denying most simple pleasures. Surely. You sense their inviting stares? My eyes are usually fixated elsewhere. But most men of your stature fall helplessly into the crevasse of decadence. I fortunately haven't strayed down that unfamiliar path, sir. I'm glad to hear we have that understanding. Shall we get down to business, Colonel? Yes, sir. We'll conduct all business in here, for my office is cluttered and has a foul smell of a dead rat. Would you care for a whiskey, sir? No, thank you. I never drink before the early evening. Suit yourself. I'll indulge in a taste of brandy. Mr. Holmes referred you to me, and I'm impressed by your military background. How was your trip from New York? Pleasant enough. The food on the train was unusually delicious. Company, passengers amusing at times, but I slept a great deal. Mr. Holmes, I presume, shared the overall scope of my moving picture with you? Thoroughly, sir. And it will be a remarkable, ambitious endeavor. I may be green around my ears when it comes to producing moving pictures, but when it comes to blood and guts, I'm well versed. Haven't you seen D.W. Griffith's The Birth of a Nation? Yes, sir. I was a consultant on that picture. I'm sure Mr. Holmes advised you of that. Yes, he did. And that's why you're here, sir. I saw it in Boston when it first came out. After the last frame flickered on that screen, I stepped out of the theater into a riotous crowd of inflamed protesters, and it was then that I knew what I was going to do. DW showed me the way, and I was instantly committed in reviving an old memory of mine. Tell me this, Colonel. Why would a blue-bellied northerner like you want to invest your talents unfurling our glorious flag of old Dixie once again? The war's been over for 50 years, sir, and your picture will be an historical document for future generations to learn by. What exactly do you think I'm teaching? Hopefully, the truth of opposing forces on a battlefield tipping the course of history. I consider it's a noble endeavor that led to the abolishing of plantations and the freeing of slaves. I suppose it depends on what history book you're reading from. Are you satisfied with your contract? Yes, sir. It's quite generous, thank you. A man should be paid for what he is worth. But between you and me, Mr. Holmes is worth half of what I'm paying you. Do you find anything wrong with that? It's not my business to judge. I'm paying you for an opinion, Colonel. I hardly know the man. If I told you I was paying 10 times what you're getting, would that sharpen your opinion any? No, sir, for he may very well be entitled to that sum, sir. You're an intelligent man, prone to avoid a ruckus, and in possession of a tempered wit. I understand you served in the Spanish-American War, leading men into battle and seeing many die. Is that right? Yes, sir. I was there. How was it? Under old rough-riding Colonel Teddy Roosevelt. He treated his troops proper, sir, with a temperament most of us grew to appreciate. He had a way of strengthening men, where Cuba wasn't kindly to those shrouded in weakness. Did you hear he got shot in Milwaukee? Yes, sir. I heard that terrible news. Would it offend you if I said old Teddy is nothing but a Yankee bastard? There's no offense, sir. I'm confident you have your reasons. Doesn't anything get you riled up? I fought my war too, Colonel. Under General Lee's bad old man, Lieutenant General Jubal Early on the bloody plains of Gettysburg. I suffered a mini-ball in my right leg and damn near lost it under a surgeon's hungry saw blade. Jubal never surrendered to those damn Yankees, but fled to Canada and to Mexico. President Johnson honorably pardoned him in 1868, and I went to his funeral in 1894 at Lynchburg. I, too, have never surrendered. What does your Yankee blood say about that? Believe stirring up seditious dust only clouds our vision for our prosperous future. Mr. Gray calmly picks up one of his pistols and points it at the colonel's head. I could part your forehead like a pelted pumpkin. What's the meaning of this, sir? Have you ever seen a man's head struck by a fleeting projectile? Is this some kind of game, sir? At this range, the bullet will pass through the skull, embedding into the wall. The question is, do I want to be beleaguered with its mess? Draw down, sir. I believe you're in no position to deliver any orders, Colonel.
What have we here, John? Is this how we show our hospitality to our new guests?
You, being a soldier, should have recognized my barrels plugged. Nothing to fear here, Colonel, for I need a good reason to kill a man. Isn't that true, Tiffany?
Yes, John, you're the pedestal of kindness. Colonel, don't let my husband's warped sense of humor shake you any. Let me chaperone you to our veranda for a cool glass of lemonade, and I don't want to hear any objections about it, John.
All right, we'll take a short break, Colonel. Please forgive my unusual habit of testing men to see how they perform under pressure.
Colonel, shall we?
Tiffany lifts her arm to the Colonel, and he takes it, and they walk together from the room. Mr. Gray opens the wooden box, placing the pistol inside, and puts it in the drawer. Thornton? Yes, sir? Don't you ever spoil my business again. No, sir. Get out there and keep a close eye on our guest. I don't want a stinking carpetbagger Yankee touching what's mine. Now get. Thornton exits, leaving Mr. Gray, sipping his brandy as the light slowly dimmed to black. Thornton's laughing is heard in the black as the light slowly rise on Mr. Millstone, standing in the shadows of the prison. Yes, sir. You should have seen the Colonel's face as she walked him inside. His face was the whitest white man I ever did see. He looked like he had fallen head first into a barrel of biscuit powder. I wouldn't try being so easily amused when your life is dangling on a thin thread. I don't mean no harm by it. I took your case in respect of Mr. Gray. And if you're innocent, I need you sober. I'm grateful, sir. I cuts up now and then, but I'll try not laughing. On the eve of Mr. Gray's death, why were you seen holding a bloodied knife over his body? Well, when I saw that knife sticking in him, I thought it best to pull it out of his chest. Mrs. Gray said she heard a loud ruckus from the parlor at about midnight. She clearly heard two male voices. One she recognized as her husband, but the other was too quiet. I heard too, and that's what stirred me from my bed. There were only two people in the residence that night besides Mr. Gray, and both of you were wearing sleeping garments, and his blood was only on you. Why is that? I swear it wasn't me, sir. When I saw him lying on the floor, he looked real bad, but was still breathing. Blood. Lots of blood was pouring out of his mouth. Poor Mr. Gray was trying to say something. I got on my knees and he reaches up and grabs me. Then he holds me close. I never saw so much blood pour out of a man as I did that night. Your initial testimony mentioned nothing about Mr. Gray saying anything. It don't? No, not a single word was spoken about it. Well, that's right then. I just must have thought he wanted to. Are you absolutely sure about that? Yes, sir. But I'll never forget his eyes. He looked up at me like never before. I think he was talking to me with his eyes. What was it he was trying to say? I ain't sure, but I know I never been looked at by him that way. He gazed right through me and then closed his eyes. I held him in my arms until hearing Mrs. Tiffany's voice. No, sir, she didn't deserve seeing him that way. Did she have any reason to murder Mr. Gray? Mrs. Tiffany? No, sir. She might be unhappy at times, but it wasn't in her nature to kill anyone. Besides, just like you said, there wasn't any blood on her. She was as clean as if stepping out of a bath. When was the last time Colonel Brubaker was in her presence? That's easy to remember. It was 2 months back at Mr. Gray's 66th birthday. That was one big night with a whole lot of people coming to show their respect. You were there? Remember? Yes, but I don't recall seeing Colonel Brubaker. He arrived later, and Mrs. Tiffany ushered him through the kitchen to the servants' quarter. Are you sure about that? Yes, sir. Nothing happens in Mr. Gray's house I don't know about. Didn't you find that unsatisfactorily peculiar? I do what I'm told and never do the telling. Where was Mr. Gray when this was going on? He was liquored up and spinning war tales to Mr. Holmes in the parlor. The film director? Yes, sir. They were discussing moving pictures and were laughing, bragging, and doing a whole lot of drinking. The light slowly began to fade. I was hoping Mr. Gray wasn't wondering where his young wife might be. I hate lying, but I wasn't about to tell him her whereabouts. Lord knows. I don't understand why people having plenty keep fetching more than they supposed to need. As the lights slowly rise on the parlor, laughter continues to be heard from Mr. Gray and Mr. Wyatt Holmes. Oh, God. Imagine. Imagine that elastic bra. I do believe Mary Phelps Jacob truly outdone herself by threatening women from biting their natural bosoms. I swear by freeing their tits, it's inviting the eventual collapse of our entire civilization. Born and freed, I'd take them as offered, sir. Can't they see Foreman, the National Women's Party, is only encouraging disobedience? What the hell do they need to be organized for when men already do all the planning? I suppose you heard about Rose O'Neal becoming a lady millionaire by designing something called a Cupid doll. I'm telling you straight, if we men don't pull in the reins on them, they'll be fighting to be a senator someday. Or even worse, the president of our country. Judging by your hostile demeanor, I take it you have a bone to pick with our fair sex? Well, everything has its place, and you don't invite a jackass in a horse race or have a drunkard tending your bar. Women should be honored by the stations they've been given, and anything short of that is absolute anarchy. I like it when a woman tussles with me. It's liberating to let them sow their oats a bit. You actors are all alike. You furiously squeeze each other's fruits while neglecting the plowing, planting, and harvesting that life expects of us. What the hell are you talking about? Your house is aflame and near ruin. But you mindless artists only lay around admiring its destructive beauty. I'm not amused, sir. Speak plainly. You're a pompous ass. Is that plain enough? Why are you attacking my character, sir? You're void of any character, sir. You immerse yourself in delusions, prancing from costume to costume, mumbling idiotic rubbish and clownishly paint your face with nothing but falsehoods. I won't stand listening to bushwhacks of insults, sir. Are you completely mad, Mr. Gray? Have you ever worn a uniform? Yes. I once had a small part as a soldier in Ivanhoe. The damn director had me standing so far upstage nobody could distinguish my features. On a field of battle, you idiot! Control your tone with me, sir. Or what? Will you thrash me with a wooden sword? Or slap me with the palm of your dainty hand? Or even better yet, splatter me with stage blood, pretending you've delivered me a mortal blow? Is there no grizzle in your gut? I believe not. You're a buffoon, sir. You're an illusion that will never see the light of day because you really don't exist. Happy birthday and good night, sir. I've had enough of this. Mr. Holmes sets his whiskey glass on the fire mantel and begins to leave the parlor. Mr. Gray opens a drawer where the dueling pistols box is and picks one of them up and points it at him. I'm not finished entertaining, sir. What do you take me for? It's plain to see your pistol is nothing but a cheap stage prop with a plugged barrel. Mr. Gray places the pistol on the table and pulls another pistol from his jacket and once again points it at him. Your theater life has sharpened your wits, but you're still in checkmate. I have a habit of measuring men who I do business with before the ink dries on their contract. I assure you this is no prop, but packs a nasty bite. You're horribly sick, sir. Mr. Gray picks the other pistol from the box and sets it on the table. Pick it up, Mr. Holmes, and inspect well, sir. Feel its weight and balance and smooth barrel. Are you familiar with the Russian roulette? I refuse to be part of your demented charade. Don't try me, sir, and don't think I won't shoot you. The sheriff is a dear friend of mine, and the district judge sits at my poker table every Thursday night. I would tell him I was accosted by a deranged drunkard bastard in my own home and was only defending myself. Pick it up, Mr. Holmes. Thornton enters the doorroom. Would you be needing anything, sir? Mr. Holmes and I are satisfied. You can go, Thornton. Are you sure, sir? I'm very sure. Thornton calmly looks at Mr. Holmes, then quietly exits. There's my witness. Highly unlikely, because he does what he's told. There's one cartridge in the chamber. It's time to see how you embrace reality. Trust me, this is no stage illusion. Pick it up. Mr. Holmes picks the pistol off the table and quickly aims it at Mr. Gray's head. Damn you! You must feel lucky. I have 6 cartridges to your 1. Pull that trigger, and you will surely die. Lower it, Mr. Holmes, and your odds in living will greatly increase. Mr. Holmes lowers his pistol. If I survive this insanity, I shall kill you, Mr. Gray. The rules are simply this. I ask you 3 questions, and those answers correctly, you may refrain from pulling the trigger. But for those answered incorrectly, you must pull the trigger. If you stop playing, I will shoot you squarely between your eyes. Are you ready to begin, Mr. Holmes? May you rot in hell, you crazy bastard. Temper, Mr. Holmes isn't going to save you. You can raise your pistol barrel to your temple, sir. Question number 1. Are you a competent movie picture director? Yes, I surely am. I'm sorry to hear that, because your delusional impression of yourself is lacking. You may squeeze the trigger, sir. Mr. Holmes hesitates while staring into Mr. Gray's eyes as he slowly begins to pull the trigger. The lights abruptly go black, with the voice of Mr. Millstone being heard. Thornton is lightly coughing as he sits behind the table in the prison. Why did you stop? My throat's dry as cotton, sir. Do you think I can get a glass of water? You hold that thought where you left off, and I'll be right back. He leaves the room and quickly enters, handing him a tin cup of water. Thank you, sir. I can't. Thank you, sir. I can't remember when talking was this hard before. I never heard him speak poorly of you, sir. Mr. Gray like you. We have a lot of ground to cover. Get back to what happened in the parlor that night. Yes, sir. As dry as cotton on an August sun, parched day. The water's not so bad here. I try to look at the good side whenever I can. How did you meet him, Mr. Millstone? I'll do the questioning. Yes, sir. What makes you so curious about my relationship with him? Because I remember him saying you came to supper on the night I was gone. You must have heard wrong then. Our first introduction was on the evening of the Masons' annual Christmas party honoring Mr. Gray as Man of the Year. You were there. I saw you. Couldn't be me, sir. I was dead, sick, with my head buried in a puck bucket. I kept telling myself to quit eating pork, but I don't listen too well. No, sir. The fattier and greasier, the better is more to my liking. It must have been another blackie you got me confused with. Most folks figure all black shoes look the same from a distance, don't they? I distinctly remember you standing on the front porch, greeting with the guests. How can I trust anything you're saying? if you can't recall this simple truth. I don't understand why we're crossing roads, sir, but I give you my word, there's nothing to be gained by calling you a liar. If I sense any further indifference to the truth from what you're saying, I'll dismiss myself. Do you understand me? Yes, sir. What became of Mr. Gray and the Colonel on that night? They were in the servants' room, and I heard them laughing and talking, but I never saw their faces. Didn't you find the unacceptable behavior and had the mind to inform Mr. Gray about it? It's Mrs. Tiffany's business, and I just do the listening, but never the telling. Mr. Gray was licked up and swinging a loaded pistol. No, sir, I didn't want anyone getting hurt over a misunderstanding. Adultery is no simple matter. From what I see, where I stood, Mr. Gray was causing the biggest ruckus, and I was afraid for Mrs. Tiffany. Fair enough. What became of Mr. Holmes in the parlor? As I was saying, Mr. Gray was pointing his pistol at him, waiting for him to squeeze his trigger. The lights slowly dim while Thornton continues speaking. After Mr. Holmes pulls that trigger, his body is shaking like a chicken in a henhouse. He knows it ain't over 'cause Mr. Gray's got 2 more questions to ask. They stood there glaring at each other like 2 parsons swinging on a thin branch. Thornton laughs as the dimming lights go to black. The lights rise on the parlor with the 2 men facing one another. Are you enjoying your game, Mr. Holmes? Go to hell. I'm well acquainted with fear. Have you ever dangled between the chasm of life and death? No. I was in the open field at Gettysburg, bathed in the blood of my fallen comrades in arms. There were thick clouds of gunpowder in the air, burning my lungs with every breath. Sheer terror coiled around me as I saw arms and legs turning into red plumes of vapor, showering down on me like a gentle morning mist. The war's over. It's never for me, sir. Our nation may have moved on, but I stand firm. The flag of Dixie waves in my heart and will never be surrendered. They stole our way of life, forcing us to kneel when we were proud men standing. And our pride, sir, can never be taken away. What pride, sir? Why, this is only a morbid charade. You look weary, but you're in luck, Mr. Holmes, for your pistol chamber is empty. Mr. Gray takes the pistol from him, tips it upward, and begins slowly pulling the trigger. Did you seriously believe I would murder my very own picture director? We have a film to shoot, sir. There's nothing to fear here. As the lights abruptly go black, a gunshot is heard. In the dark, Thornton's laughter is heard as the lights slowly rise. Yes, sir. Mr. Holmes darn near jumped out of his pants. He was so scared. Most folks know what a prankster Mr. Gray was. Poor Mr. Holmes didn't say nothing, but grabs his hat and coat and walks out of that parlor like a tornado hit him. Mr. Gray sent him a formal apology the next morning, promising him a bigger contract. Yes, sir. Mr. Gray was one big prankster. He never showed this side of himself to me. That's 'cause he liked you. He only acted that way to folks he had trouble trusting. How did the evening end? Mr. Gray finished his drink and stumbled up to bed. He wasn't curious about Mrs. Gray's whereabouts. He never mentioned anything about it. I figured he was too liquored up to remember anything. What became of her that night? After Mr. Gray settled to bed, they came out of the servants' room into the parlor. What time was it? Most of the guests started leaving an hour before midnight, and Mr. Gray's game of roulette ended at 1:15. It must have been pushing 1:15 when Mrs. Tiffany entered the parlor. Where were you? I was in my room down the hall from the servants' quarter. I kept my door cracked a bit so I could hear what's going on around the house. That's a long-time habit of mine, to be the last one sleeping. What then? I heard them walking like a couple of kids, late for church. Were they saying anything? A child's whisper can be heard from here. If you're wanting to keep a secret, you don't want to be sharing it in the parlor. No, sir. The walls got ears in there. Then what happened? I think I'd be intruding her privacy if I go on talking. She's not on trial, but you are. Tell me what you know, Thornton. I don't want to be betraying her trust, sir. You have my word. I'll keep what you say in strict confidence. Now go on. Well, sir, when I didn't hear their voices, I figured I'd best get up and see what's going on in there. What did you see? They were standing next to the fireplace. I felt bad hiding like a peeping Tom in the hallway, but I didn't know what kind of a man the colonel was, so I figured to stick around a while. A second there, I thought for sure they'd heard me breathing, so I held my breath until I nearly passed out. I was hoping and praying Mr. Gray didn't wake up, 'cause Mrs. Tiffany would have been in a heap of trouble. What happened next? I tried to look, but my eyes just had their own mind. Yes, sir. I felt like a cornered fox in a hen house with no back door. The lights slowly rise on Mrs. Gray and the colonel engaging in a passionate kiss.
He's a light sleeper. Does this frighten you?
The colonel quiets her with another gentle kiss. You have a dangerous appetite. Can I ever dare look at you in your eyes when in your husband's presence without his detecting my misgiving desire?
Hush now. Don't mention him. This evening belongs to us.
She lightly kisses him. Your precious scent shields me from all fear.
I've wanted a man like you for so very long, and I won't be robbed of this joy I feel.
He passionately embraces her until another longer kiss. I too feel as if I'm in a dream, wanting never to awaken ever again.
I'll help you sleep, my love. Take me as you wish so we can dream together.
He gently moves her to the table, kneeling down to lift her dress, when suddenly a loud thump to the floor is heard in the hallway.
It's him.
The lights abruptly go black. Thornton's laughter once again is heard in the dark as the lights slowly rise. I slipped and bumped my head against the wall. They must have jumped clear to St. Louis. When nobody came, they started breathing more easy. Surely Mr. Gray must have been roused. No, sir. He was too liquored up like a wet sponge to notice anything. Mr. Gray certainly muddies the water. Did you witness her doing this before? No, sir. But she had a bad habit of keeping awful friendly when the younger men strolled in. This is promising information. What else happened? If you're thinking she had anything to do with poor Mr. Gray's dying, I can't accept that, sir. I'm the lawyer here. You just answer what I'm asking. Yes, sir. What else happened in the parlor? The light begins to dim. Well, when I got quiet, the cat walked in and out of the parlor, pushing a giggle out of Mrs. Tiffany. The lights dim to black. The lights slowly rise in the parlor, with Mrs. Gray and the Colonel cuddled together.
It's John's Persian cat, Delilah. She must have tipped over one of our vases in the hallway. Are you all right, Colonel?
No, it's rather burdensome embracing another man's wife in the middle of the night.
There's nothing to fear. Had he heard anything, you'd probably be dead already.
Really?
Oh, yes, John. He's a severely jealous man. He would kill you on the spot if he found you encroaching on what's his.
Has he ever done anything like that
I
before?
would never know, but a couple of his young associates he had over for dinner surprisingly disappeared. John is definitely a man you don't want to cross.
I believe we should. And I believe we should end our evening then.
What a shame, and it's getting so cozy. Before you go, I want to tell you something. He once told me that he and other men bushwhacked a big Confederate shipment near the crossroads of Lincoln County, Georgia. They mutilated those men and took off with $500,000 worth of gold.
But he fought on the South Side, didn't he?
He had no special loyalty when it came to his personal profit. He considered this a severance for his duty served.
He killed his own?
That's what he told me. He didn't become a successful banker by only peddling pots and pans.
We had better walk lightly out of the room before another second ticks by.
He butchered them, and he fed them to swamp gators.
Not another word. Psh, not another word. Let's find our way to the door. He cautiously takes a few steps.
Aren't you curious where he buried the gold?
Gold?
Most of it's still buried.
Here?
Close by.
Where?
You want me to show you?
Abruptly, the voice of Mr. Gray bellows throughout the darkened corners of the house. Where the hell are you, Tiffany? The lights go promptly black. The lights rise on Thornton and Mr. Millstone in the prison. Did you find them? No, sir. I heard them coming my way. And I crawled into the small opening under the staircase. I nearly broke my back, bruising a kidney getting in there. I swear a spider bit my ankle, but I kept from hollering. Mr. Gray never came down to the parlor? No, sir. He was too drunk to walk down the stairs, I guess. Sit still while I inform the guards I'm leaving. After lunch, we'll return to our discussion. I ain't going nowhere. Mr. Millstone stops and turns to Thornton before exiting. After Holmes left you, said Mr. Gray went up to bed. Is that correct? Yes, sir. He was snoring like a baby as I lifted his shoes off his feet. It's like I said, if Mr. Gray wandered off after I tucked him in, I would have known about it, 'cause all the walls have ears. They tell me everything. Mr. Millstone exits, leaving Thornton sitting with his shackled hands resting on the table. The lights slowly dim to black. Intermission.